With a good script, a good director can produce a masterpiece. With the same script, a mediocre director can make a passable film. But with a bad script, even a good director can't possibly make a good film. For truly cinematic expression, the camera and the microphone must be able to cross both fire and water. That is what makes a real movie. The script must be something that has the power to do this. That's a quote by Akira Kurosawa. It's fitting that I open my discussion with this Kurosawa quote, since the original Star Wars films draw so much from this man's life work. Surely any fan has heard of the excellent film The Hidden Fortress and its influence on the galaxy far, far away. Perhaps influence is putting it mildly. It's certain that Star Wars wouldn't exist without Kurosawa. Themes of spirituality, of honor, the warrior's code, these are all present in many of his films. He was a master storyteller who wrote or co-wrote many of his scripts. He was a devourer of novels and loved cinema as an art form, developing his style from early silent films. As the title of this video suggests, this essay is going to be about the new Star Wars trilogy, episodes 7 through 9. I bring up the name of this Grand Master Kurosawa because I feel strongly that anyone who presumes to lead a Star Wars project but doesn't love and understand Kurosawa shouldn't be hired. That doesn't mean the new films need to be derivative of his work. At a script level, however, the Star Wars films need to share Kurosawa's DNA. The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi do not. According to our great teacher, the backbone of every film is its script. Let's take him at his word. I'll state my thesis up front. I don't believe episodes 7 or 8 would pass scrutiny in a college-level creative writing class. I believe any student of the discipline would be able to poke massive holes in the foundation of both of these stories. Tempting as it is, I'm not going to approach this critique as a disappointed fan, which I am. Instead, I'm going to try and back up all my arguments with examples. I'm also not only going to be deconstructive, I'm going to recommend improvements based on the existing canon, assuming a redo isn't on the horizon. Episode 9 has just wrapped shooting, of course, but let's do this more of as a workshop exercise. I think it's important for anyone in a creative field, or even enthusiasts, to analyze professional work. I take storytelling very seriously, and so should anyone who enjoys film. Do you like a certain movie? Have you ever asked yourself why you like it? Ever thought of examples? Do you dislike a certain movie? Why? These are some of the same questions you might ask if you're trying to learn how to shoot free throws. Did you miss your shots? Do you sink them? Why? How can you improve? One final point. I don't think there's anything wrong with holding the Star Wars series under scrutiny. All the greatest work of art are studied hundreds or even thousands of years after their creation. Nobody can say Star Wars isn't great. The original trilogy, anyway. If this newest trilogy was called by another title, let's say Adventures in Space, I suspect they would have been considered maybe just decent sci-fi flicks and then forgotten the next summer. By contrast, the great stories of our species may contain truths and knowledge that have existed for millennia. None of us will live for more than 100 years if we're fortunate. Storytelling, though, is how ideas, or memes, can live beyond our lifetimes. Stories are like packages that contain things like archetypes, morals, characters, heroes. Perhaps you'll recognize something called the hero's journey if you're a fan of Star Wars. At the foundation of every story is its thesis, which is directly related to the word theme. So let's examine the themes of Star Wars, the new trilogy, and why the latest films either ignore or don't seem to understand them. When is the last time you were in a church, or a temple, or a holy place? What did you feel when you were there? Reverence, boredom, inspiration, reflection, awe? What kinds of questions did you ask yourself? What is life? What is its meaning? Why am I here? What's my place in all this? Heard that one before? I've listened to countless reviews of the latest Star Wars trilogy, and it seems that only a few of them touch on what I think is the most fundamental pillars of Star Wars, which is spirituality. The original trilogy was a sort of spiritual buffet. It combines many religions, including Buddhism, the Tao, and Shinto, which is broadly related to animism. All of these coalesce, in Star Wars, into a vague but beautiful concept referred to as the Force. From animism, we're taught that there's life in everything, even things we perceive as inanimate, like rocks or trees. The original trilogy goes a step further and asks us, can machines be part of the Force too? According to these three films, the first three films, the answer is no. Machines are meant to be controlled by the animate world, but they do not possess the Force, at least machines that don't have intelligence. Consider what Luke was told when Obi-Wan encouraged him to turn off his sensors in his X-Wing, as he was targeting the weak spot in the first Death Star. Then consider Darth Vader, who is more machine than man. Machinery represents a lack of spirituality in Star Wars. It represents mankind's desire to transcend, pervert, and subjugate nature. In the original trilogy, machines are bad, and yet droids have personalities. They're animated. Those who use the dark side are considered wicked. They do unnatural, destructive things with their power. Those who use the light side live like monks, using their abilities to nurture life and deny the flesh. Nonetheless, when you use the Force to manipulate things in the physical world in Star Wars, it's because you're touching the spiritual world. Since there's life in everything, even cold, supposedly lifeless metal, Yoda was able to lift Luke's X-Wing out of the water. Luke could see the blaster sphere thing shoot lasers at him in A New Hope, and he could deflect the blasts with his lightsaber. In the Tao, we see a struggle, not between good and evil necessarily, rather chaos and order. The Star Wars prequels, for all their faults, still do a decent job at showing what happens to a society when too much order has taken over. It leaves a huge vacuum for chaos to come in. There's no balance. Have any of you played Dungeons & Dragons? If so, you might know that chaos and order aren't moral pronouncements. You can be chaotic good or lawful evil, for example. The Old Republic, in the prequels, was stale, tied up in bureaucracy. The Empire was lawful, but evil. The original Sith, as portrayed in the Darth Bane trilogy, were chaotic neutral. You might even argue chaotic good. In Knights of the Old Republic, you had a choice to use either the light or dark side, or perhaps be neutral. Again, you could call this balanced. There's so much that can be said about the Force. It's beautiful, it's mysterious, it's in us and all around us. Why then does the new trilogy barely even touch it? The Force isn't about parlor tricks like making things levitate or hacking people's brains. The Force is life itself. It's the very thing that you stare up into the sky and wonder about. It's so vast and it's everywhere. It's unknowable but invites you to become one with it. The Force is the thing we take with us when we leave the movie theater. It's the opening of our third eyes. Why do so few people seem to understand this? Why does nobody mention this in the reviews of The Last Jedi and in The Force Awakens? When they say there's something wrong about these films, but they can't quite put their fingers on it. Here's why. I don't think these new films are being written by spiritual people. Let's completely bypass the corporate side of things. We know these movies need to sell action figures and that board meetings take place to put all kinds of things in the scripts that don't belong there. let's pretend Star Wars is a work of creative expression. And again, let's remember this is a creative writing class. When we first meet Luke, he wants to become a Jedi. So does Rey. So do we, as members of the audience. Becoming a Jedi opens our minds. It gives us strength and meaning and a connection to ancient knowledge. Who wouldn't want to become one? How do you become one, anyway? According to the hero's journey, you have to find a sage. Luke had Ben Kenobi, followed by Yoda. Obi-Wan teaches Luke some fun tricks, but more importantly than that, he makes Luke curious. There's more to the Force than these tricks. The Force holds answers to every question Luke has ever and will ever ask. Answers to questions he wouldn't even know to ask. As audience members follow Luke on his journey, we crave this knowledge so we can take it home with us to ponder. This is why us nerds see these movies so many times over. They contain wisdom. Who hasn't walked out of a theater as a kid or an adult and tried to lift something off the table with the Force? Did you succeed? I didn't. But we could still ponder the mysteries of the Force as we're lying in bed at night thinking. So how is knowledge, any knowledge, passed from one brain to another? Through books and through teachers and through practice. This is what the Jedi do. The Jedi in A New Hope are an all but dead religion in the galaxy, all their records having been destroyed. Have you ever played a video game and lost your save file? It feels frustrating, right? Well, in that sense, knowledge is our species' version of a save file that we pass down from generation to generation. That's what happened to the Jedi when the Empire took over. Obi-Wan is a great sage. Yoda's an even greater sage. This is a beautiful and sacred role in archetypal storytelling. We have to honor people who are older than us and who know more than us. They're keepers of tradition and knowledge. Their job is to pass the torch to younger people, and it's the duty of students to listen to and expand upon that knowledge. In The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, Rey is a student in search of a mentor. She finds Han Solo, who can only confirm that the Force exists. He points Rey to Luke, the real sage. Except when she meets him, well, you know what happens, but why? Here's another quote from Akira Kurosawa. "There's nothing that says more about its creator than the work itself." Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi is not a sage. He's portrayed as an old fool. When we and Rey meet him, we are not filled with hope and excitement. We're disappointed, even disgusted. Remember now, this is a creative writing critique. What is the author's intent with this message? Words like subversive have been used. Let me also add words like sacrilegious, perhaps, and irreverent. To be clear, I'm not pronouncing a moral stance on whether the author's intent was good or wicked. He wanted to tell us something about himself, like Kurosawa says, so let's listen. In The Last Jedi, Rey has no sage. This film boldly pronounces Luke as unworthy of the title. He has studied the history of the Jedi in secret and faced his own related hardships. He's become crestfallen, hopeless. He has no lessons left to pass on to a student. No worthy lessons, anyway. Unfortunately, we and Rey are left to teach ourselves the way of the Force, because according to the author of this piece, the keepers of ancient knowledge are corrupt. The Jedi failed to stop Darth Sidious. Luke failed to prevent Kylo from converting to the dark side. He wants to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Well, fine. Luke's story concludes with him throwing away his old religion, the one he spent his whole adult life attempting to revive. Rey is left with the sacred Jedi text able to interpret them however she wishes, like a religious reformer. This allows future authors of Star Wars, whoever they may be, to reinterpret the Force however they see fit. Is that a lesson that a wise teacher would promote? Is that what Yoda would tell us to do? Or would he tell us that the Force exists, has always existed, and that we're only a part of it? That it can't be manipulated or appropriated, at least without consequences. Speaking of learning from the past, let's consider the theme of inheritance for a moment. What's your relationship with your parents like? Do you want to be like them? Are they lacking in traits that you want to develop in yourself? Do they possess traits that you don't want to adopt? These are parts of our origin story, just like those of Rey and Luke. For Luke, his is the theme that a certain great teacher of our time talks about, rescuing your father from the underworld representing chaos. His statement isn't simply about rescuing Anakin, at least not physically. It's also about reviving old traditions which have been forgotten and corrupted. When Luke is called to rescue his father and revive the Jedi Order, we are also being called to reach into our own families, traditions, our cultures, and revive and purify them. That's why the story of Luke's parentage resonates with us so deeply. That's why fans got angry when Hayden Christensen was replaced as Ghost Anakin at the end of Return of the Jedi. His was the story about redemption, of coming full circle. Those of us who criticize Star Wars, we've taken these lessons to heart. We criticize our beloved series because it isn't following its own theses. We want it to do better. But Rey doesn't know her parents. According to The Last Jedi, she may even be her own parent. This could have some fascinating lore implications, but I'm also frustrated by the theme I mentioned a moment ago about reformation. As of Episode 8, Rey is free to interpret the Jedi texts however she, and Disney, pleases. If that's true, and that her existence is a physical manifestation of the Force, that could mean she is a conduit for the Force. Hence, the Force awakens. Her will is the will of the Force. In the hands of a good writer, this can be interesting. I, however, have not seen enough examples from Kathleen Kennedy and her hires to make me optimistic. Rey, nonetheless, is obsessed with the ideas of origin, of mentors, of learning who she is, where she came from. This is key to her character and story arc and is being set up as a big reveal in Episode 9. I'll get to character-specific arcs in a moment, but for now, let me ask one more question related to themes and spirituality. What is the status quo of the galaxy in the new trilogy? What's it like to be a citizen of the New Republic? Unfortunately, aside from Rey growing up on a salvage planet, we never find out. I believe this is a monstrous failure of writing, and definitely a big no-no in creative writing. In the same way, every scene in film needs an establishing shot to orient audiences. Every story needs a setting, framing specifically. Sadly, we can't learn what the New Republic is like because these films have no spirituality. Let me illustrate what I mean. Imagine a graph of spirituality, followed by ideology, then politics, then laws. Each one of these depends on the previous one to take form. Spirituality informs ideology, which shapes politics, which finally manifest in laws, which are, of course, enforced by force. Without a setting for the new trilogy, all we're left with is character studies. Leia awaits Luke's return, an archetype similar to waiting for a savior, a rescuer, a messiah. Rey goes into space, into the heavens, to find this missing hero, like a Christian who's sick of waiting for Jesus and goes out to find him instead. Except when she finds the savior, he's corrupted, fallen. The moral of The Last Jedi, the thesis, and perhaps that of the entire trilogy, is that we have to become our own saviors. To take tradition and the sacred Jedi texts and reinterpret and twist history itself to fit our own eisegetical projections. Seeing as this is a creative writing critique, I will reserve my own judgments on the ethics of this thesis. However, let me say this. In religion, there's a word for this sort of pronouncement: heresy. Is it any surprise that fans of Star Wars were disappointed, even to the point of outrage, by this dishonoring of what they revered? If you don't love someone, why kiss them? If you don't love Star Wars, why write one? Let me move on to characters and propose some positive changes that can be made to improve the story as it already exists. A few months ago, in a fit of inspiration and frustration, I wrote this about the new trilogy. Quote, Star Wars is about characters, not events. If the characters don't develop, if they don't have satisfying arcs, nobody cares about the stuff blowing up on the screen. It's just a light show. It's all frosting and no cake. End quote. Every computer needs an operating system. Otherwise, a PC is just a bunch of interconnected parts that don't know how to communicate with each other. In the same way, there's no point in talking about character motivations without first establishing what a character's purpose in life is. Perhaps we don't reflect on the meanings of our life every morning when we get out of bed, but it does drive each one of us subconsciously when we choose our goals. When we don't have life goals, we become depressed. Life loses meaning. Why do you get up every morning? Are you just a bunch of organs connected by veins, packaged in skin, or is there something more to you? When writing a character, what are their goals and targets for daily life? Each character must have some reason to get out of bed in the morning. With all this said, let's examine some of the characters in the new trilogy and how we can write them better. Rey. Rey has been studying the sacred Jedi texts while cruising around in the Millennium Falcon. She has meditated upon them, collected Jedi relics, and has reached new stages of enlightenment. She is now living like a Jedi monk, focused on spiritual matters. According to Buddhism and Shinto, that would mean she has no need for matters of the flesh, nothing at all to do with physical reproduction. Unfortunately for Disney and teenage fans, that means Reylo can never and will never happen. Why? Because luminous beings are we, and not this crude matter. Finn and Kylo may want Rey, but she has gained knowledge that allows her to transcend beyond the physical world. Carnal desires don't concern her anymore. She is studying the Force and has learned that neither the light side nor the dark side hold the answers. Rather, it's a balance between the two, since both are the Force. Remember a certain prophecy about bringing balance to the Force? That's what the Tao is all about. Living in the eye of the storm between order and chaos. Accepting both, but adopting neither. Nonetheless, Star Wars is a fantasy film about space wizards, as it's been said, and that's fun, so she does have to destroy the New Order at some point. She wins, because of course she does. As she battles with Kylo, she has an epiphany. All the lessons she's been struggling with suddenly snap into place. She finally understands the Force and what balance means. She can see all of Kylo's moves miles ahead of time. So much so that she doesn't even have to fight him or even move sometimes. She can see right through him. Kylo, still using the dark side, becomes more and more frustrated until he exhausts himself. More importantly, at the end of Episode 9, Rey will not find her parents, nor will she have children. Instead, she'll have ascended into enlightenment and acquired disciples who she will disseminate this knowledge to. I believe Disney, with their desire to titillate teenage fans and sell toys, is 100% incapable of writing the scenario properly. Nonetheless, I think this is where her natural story arc is leading. Kylo. He perhaps has some kind of romantic connection with Rey, but I would only permit this to be one-sided as a writer. Rey is more spiritual than Kylo, because he is a dark side user. According to the lore of Star Wars, the dark side is associated with baser passions. Therefore, we will completely drop any hints of a mutual romantic subplot. Instead, Kylo is being torn up inside. Both the light and dark sides of the Force are warring in his spirit, and his many unspeakable crimes are tormenting him. He can't sleep anymore. He didn't directly kill his mother, but he may as well have. He has been tricked by two unworthy teachers, and will decide to forge his own path in the galaxy in Episode 9. Nobody will tell him what to do anymore. He will use the First Order against itself in a final act of rebellion, destroying himself and all his crimes at the same time. Kylo will embark on a suicidal attack against the Republic, splitting the First Order loyalists between himself and Hux. Kylo's goal is to destroy everything and to end the war by killing everyone, including himself. Naturally, this will lead to a showdown between himself and Rey. Rey will win the mighty battle, as I mentioned. Kylo, at the end, will beg for death. However, Rey has already begun her path to enlightenment, so she lets him live. She commands him to bear the burden of his crimes, and to live the rest of his life repairing the countless lives he destroyed. Death would be too easy. I would have Kylo deliver the final blow to the First Order, standing alone on top of unbelievably massive piles of destruction, as he turns and disappears into smoke, where we may or may not ever hear from him again. Finn. It's remarkable how little, after 2 films, we know about Finn. What a missed opportunity this was. What is Finn's life mission at this point? He has already left the First Order. He's wandering around without a goal in Episode 9. The first thing we're going to do is use Finn as a lens to view what life is like as a First Order grunt. Does Finn have parents? Let's give him one. Let's give him a mom that he needs to support because his dad died in the spice mines or something. Finn will visit his mom out on some remote colony, maybe with Rose as emotional support. He will tell Rose his backstory of how he was recruited to the stormtroopers because life was hard on the colony and he needed work. We will learn about the First Order through Finn, enriching both his character and the antagonists of this story. As of Episode 8, I don't care about Phasma. She is one-dimensional and extremely poorly written. We're going to fix that through flashbacks with Finn. She will have trained Finn personally, and countless other students. Phasma will have picked on Finn in particular, because she's a mean old drill sergeant. He hates her, but also respects her. She makes him stronger by feeding his anger. You want revenge against me, don't you? She'll say that when she works him within an inch of his life, time after time, forcing him into the Bacta tank. She has it out for Finn. That's why it will be important for him to confront her in Episode 9. He's confronting his own weakness, and a mentor that knows every last secret of his. Finn will need a life mission after all the fighting's over. He will do his best to stop the recruitment of new stormtroopers, and whatever the First Order turns into after it's destroyed. He'll fix the terrible living conditions that make it attractive to join the First Order, and organizations like it. He may have a crush on Rey, but that's because she's perfect space Jesus. Instead, he can hook up with Rose, a fairly straightforward romance. Poe. In the series so far, Poe has been one-dimensional. Compared to Rey and Kylo, he's frustrated that all he's good at is flying and shooting. In Episode 9, he decides he's going to fly Rey around on her missions with Chewie, gathering Jedi relics. He'll watch her do incredible feats and wonder if he can use the Force as well. He tries and fails. We see hints of jealousy growing in Poe's heart. As these characters fly around the galaxy together getting in adventures, they talk. Poe's frustrated at the impotence of the New Republic. Rey senses something about him but won't tell him what. This causes him to distrust her. At a key moment, then, he decides to abandon her. Drinking at some bar on some random planet, he gets caught and ends up in the First Order's clutches. Kylo interrogates him. They hate each other passionately, but something is wrong. They realize they both want to destroy the First Order. They agree to put their differences aside, and Poe helps Kylo destroy the First Order from the inside. At the end of the film, Poe remains in awe of the Force, and those who can use it. He doesn't understand the Force, but he believes in it and commits to being a better man, of putting his jealousy aside. For General Hux, there's a quote: "The more successful the villain, the more successful the picture." Alfred Hitchcock. General Hux is going to be one of the most important characters in Episode 9. The reason has been said many times in many ways. A plot is only as good as its antagonist. We know Domhnall Gleeson is a good actor, so we're going to use him. First, we're going to show Hux's daily routines as the co-leader of the First Order. What is his recruitment, his speech writing like? He genuinely believes he's a good guy, working for good in the galaxy. We are going to establish the First Order as a plausible alternative government to the New Republic, a wholly separate faction that does evil things, but for what it sees as overall good. We will make it seem plausible to want to join the First Order. It bothers Hux that he has to do evil things, but he has his eyes on the prize. Moral ambiguity is one of the things that was so praiseworthy about Game of Thrones, after all. General Hux will have a secret romance with a certain lady. He has kept this secret for many years, even to Kylo, who already knows this through the Force. Through Hux's interactions with her, we will see many dimensions to Hux that we haven't seen before. We will learn that he's a genius tactician, very charismatic, and very charming, like Thrawn in the Thrawn trilogy. In Kylo's absence, Hux is the de facto leader of the First Order, something he isn't bad at all. Hux will be consolidating the First Order after Snoke has been killed. We will explain his motivations for bringing the galaxy under the Empire's rule. We're going to make this plausible with examples. Show, don't tell. We will do this through present-time examples, which will give him flashbacks to his own childhood. He will have grown up in a lawless world, full of creeps, psychos, criminals, and so on. He begged for some order in his life and the world around him. He wanted to escape. Then the Empire came to his garbage dump of a planet and cleaned the streets. He was so grateful to the Empire that he wanted to join it and spread this order all over the galaxy. In Dungeons and Dragons terms, Hux is lawful evil. He does bad things in order to establish law. As it stands in episodes 8 and 9, Hux is a one-dimensional caricature. We are going to fix that. We will learn his talents, and we may even come to pity him. His one major flaw, aside from killing bazillions of people, is that he hates sharing glory, and that means he has to deal with Kylo sooner or later. That will summarize the arcs for the main characters in episode 9. Some quick housekeeping. Maz Kanata. She can explain how she got a hold of Luke's lightsaber and perhaps other Jedi relics when Rey visits her. Personally, I haven't seen the point of her character. She was played up before episode 7 came out like Phasma, and is little more than a mystery box dispenser that speaks in riddles. Rose and Rose's sister. It would have been really cool if Rose's sister used the Force instead of kicking the detonator at the beginning of episode 8. Rose may be Force sensitive then, not that it necessarily has to be biological. She isn't Force sensitive enough to be a Jedi, but maybe she can help Rey at the end of episode 9. In the meantime, she can accompany Finn on his personal missions home to make sure his mom is safe from the war. As for Leia, Leia's going to just be dead. Let her stay dead. She has no role for the rest of the series. I would have her appear in flashbacks, maybe as a younger woman, another actress, only to establish what it was like after the New Republic took over in Episode 6. Strictly no cameos, and nothing like what happened in Rogue One. Jake Skywalker. As for Jake Skywalker, or Luke as some people call him, Mark Hamill is still alive. We have one last chance to redeem his character from Jake to Luke. Since Luke is dead, we will have to have Luke haunt Rey throughout Episode 9, giving her breadcrumbs to follow, a mystery to solve. He will have no character arc aside from watching her progress and coming to peace with his own stupid journey. He may forgive himself for what happened to Kylo and return to the Force, content that the future is bright in Rey's hands. Storytelling is one of the oldest, most important disciplines of our species. Unless nuclear war destroys the planet or the sun explodes, storytelling is our species' closest thing to a save file. Stories are how we compile our history, our memes, and pass important lessons to future generations. Like it or not, Star Wars, like many great films, is one of the touchstones of modern history. It contains many meaningful archetypes and compiles many good spiritual lessons. We fans don't like it when it's mishandled, which is unfortunate because Disney is the farthest thing from a spiritual entity. It is a gluttonous monopoly that only exists to gorge itself. But that's a topic for another day. I think J.J. Abrams is a big fan of creating mystery boxes, but is not very talented at filling them. His films are like receiving really well-wrapped Christmas presents as a child, only to find clothes inside. Abrams, as a creative leader, is good at setting up assists. It's often someone else's job to dunk the ball, though. Unfortunately, it's up to us, the audience, to fill his mystery boxes with our expectations and theories. Sadly, Disney doesn't listen to all the wonderful fan theories postulating what's inside his mystery boxes. For whatever reason, Disney has contempt for its fans. And I can't speak much for Rian Johnson because, frankly, I don't think he likes storytelling. He is a deconstructionist. He wants to break film. I think he is a mischievous experimenter who should be kept away from writing stories. I liked Looper, but hated his episode of Breaking Bad. Nonetheless, like Rey carrying the sacred Jedi texts from her unworthy masters, we're students of the original Star Wars trilogy, and perhaps some of us will write great archetypal stories of our own someday. Regardless of how we inherited this knowledge, we hold the keys to enlightenment in our hands. It's up to us to learn from masters like Kurosawa before us, and to be worthy of carrying the torch to prepare the next generation after us. We will do this for hundreds or thousands or millions of years, until the final sun sets on this beautiful planet. After that, it's up to the Force. If you made it this far, thanks so much for listening. The Indiegogo for my upcoming 300-page book, The Problematic Collection, has about 13 days left as of this recording. A link is below in the description if you'd like a copy. If you want to support what I do here, I'll also leave a link to my Patreon. And please feel free to do the usual liking and sharing on this video. Sub to my channel, follow me on Twitter, which is @gprime85, you know the deal. See you all next time.